Hello, welcome to this session, Leveraging Customer Experience to Drive Growth. My name is John Bardawill. I am a Managing Director of TMG. We are a Toronto, Canada-based consultancy. We focus on customer experience and helping organizations to do exactly what the title of this presentation is. We have experience in Canada, the US, a number of Asian markets, Australia, and a number of European markets as well. So many of the things I'm going to talk about, I'm probably going to talk from a Canadian-centric perspective, are actually extremely applicable for any market around the world. The first thing I think I'd like to say is that customer experience is difficult. In this visual of a construction site, you see all the different rebars and all the folks doing different jobs as part of trying to put a building together. It's not easy, it's very complex, and there's a lot of preparation that takes place ahead of time before you get to the stage. And that's a lot like customer experience. We see companies time and time and again who start down this road and realize that it's a lot more difficult than they thought it was. They haven't prepared themselves. They haven't considered all the issues in doing this well. And probably most importantly, they really haven't thought about the impact on the customer and what that means in terms of what kinds of things do the customers have to experience to make them pull out their wallet and spend more money with that particular organization or company. So we often try first to get companies to think more about what the customer is experiencing, not what they think the customer is experiencing. And that's a subtle but critical challenge for many organizations. Now, in terms of our experience, I'm going to give you a little bit of an example. More recently, most of you will know Walmart, obviously. Walmart has made great strides in the last year through COVID in attempting to provide a delivery service for their food by way of establishing a takeout concept. So you go and you can pick up your groceries without going into the store. And they've done a very good job with that. And in fact, in some markets, it's going extremely well. The challenge, however, is that when you actually go and get your groceries, you don't start talking to the person putting the groceries in your car. You end up allowing them to do it on their own. And then typically it's not until you get home do you realize what you received. And often what can happen and what does happen is you don't get all the things you want. So positively, Walmart has established substitution. So they tell you ahead of time of things that they couldn't provide you, and they substitute the items and they suggest to you that, hey, are these okay? And quite often they are. But what happens in the event that you actually get someone else's groceries? It has happened, and it does happen. And in that case, it's a very interesting process. You call their head office and they tell you they can't help you. You call the retail store and they have to get the manager, otherwise no one can help you. So even if you think you've done something really well from a customer experience standpoint, there's lots of challenges in that. So over the next few minutes, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about some research that we have done. It is Canadian based, but it is applicable around the world. And I'm going to focus on not what you should do in terms of becoming more customer experience focused, because each organization is different and you're all coming from different perspectives, but rather some things to consider and think about in going through this journey. So we did some research in 2018 and 2020 in Canada, and we researched both consumers and businesses and looked at what their perspectives were. So this is a selection of some of the findings. So what we found in the area of reporting, so, obviously many companies who start going down the customer experience route should be first and foremost having some way of reporting the results to measure both the current state of customer experience as well as the future state. And what we found was that in general, 50% of companies were using NPS as their way of measuring customer experience. Close to 50%, 46% in 2020, so it actually dropped, versus 53% in 2018, used customer satisfaction scoring systems to measure customer experience. And others we found were doing research studies around customer experience in an effort to find out what their customers were expecting and their perceptions. But very few companies actually did customer effort scoring, which we believe is the best way to measure customer experience. And we found that only 12% of companies that we surveyed were doing it in 2020. So ask yourself, for your organizations, how do you measure customer experience today? What are you doing in managing that? Another critical area in which we looked at was the question of what are the barriers stopping you from becoming more customer experience focused as an organization? And what we found in the 2018 study was that there was one predominant reason, and that was alignment. Organizations were seeing the internal alignment around the importance of becoming customer experience focused was the number one barrier to them actually improving it. However, in 2020, what we found is something very fascinating. Companies seem to have started to understand the complexity of customer experience and doing it better. And they identified a whole series of reasons why customer experience was not successful in the organization, whether it be conflicting priorities in the organization, whether it be lack of urgency, whether it be culture, whether it be internal silos or process complexity on how they delivered their current services. All of these were in addition to identifying alignment. So we were seeing organizations start to understand a little more detail the challenge of becoming more customer experience focused. Now, the one thing that has taken place as a result of COVID is that organizations in generally have been able to overcome a number of these areas because the importance of becoming more customer focused and doing things that allowed them to still provide their services and products to customers forced them to think about the customer experience more directly and overcome many of these barriers. So ironically, COVID helped some companies in this situation. Another area that we have looked at is the whole concept around ownership of customer experience. And now the classic statement is always made, well, everyone owns customer experience in an organization. Well, the reality is that most companies don't function that way. Some companies have identified a person or hired a function that is customer experience ownership. They have a responsibility for it, but it's always a challenge then to identify what specifically those responsibilities are and the scope of those responsibilities. We found that organizations that generally are more successful with customer experience have created customer experience cross-functional teams. They have taken representation from IT, from finance, from sales, from marketing, from human resources, delivery, shipping, depending on the nature of the business. They've taken all areas of the business and put them in a customer experience team. And they haven't given them a massive agenda. They've allowed them to start to spend time and learn about what their customers want and come to a common understanding, which then allows them to start the process of identifying significant opportunities for improving customer experience. So the key point here is that customer experience teams tend to work well in organizations because it allows the entire organization to drive a perspective. It also deals with the cultural issues that I mentioned earlier around alignment and internal silos, etc. So it's a very effective tool if implemented properly. Another area that we looked at was the whole concept of employee development in the area of customer experience. And what we found between 2020 and 2018, we actually found that in many cases, investments by companies in customer experience as it relates to the employee have actually declined. They found that traditional training, traditional coaching, and traditional education materials were not effective in helping the organization become more customer focused. In fact, what we do find in many organizations is their recruiting policies and their onboarding policies tend to have more of an impact in the ability of an organization to become more customer focused and customer experience oriented than traditional training and support development. Also, one of the other things that we noticed was that only 22% in our 2020 study actually had a 3-year customer experience plan. And those are companies that said they were very customer experience focused, which we found was an increase over 2018 results, basically double from 11% to 22%. And why do we talk about a 3-year plan? Well, a 3-year plan in customer experience, because customer experience is not easy to do, it takes a period of time and you have to have a certain level of patience for it. So what we have found typically in a 3-year plan is the first year is around assessing where their customers are and the experience is. At the end of that 1 year is being able to put together a plan that really allows for the development in year 2 of initiatives and programs and activities that support a better customer experience. And by the 3rd year, they're then in a place to actually implement them. So with that in mind, what happens is that the organization tends to find that it takes 3 years to start to make progress of any sort, and that's if it's done well. But to try and do that without a plan is very difficult. And yet we find very few companies are doing that. So when we think about why customer experience has not necessarily been successful in many companies, this is one of the key reasons. We also asked companies or customers, I should say, to rate their experience as it relates to good customer experience. What are the factors in that? The top rated components were that we found in the 2020 study was hours of operation, the company responding to an issue or service request in a timely manner, having readily accessible information that I need for my purposes as a consumer or customer, and getting what I needed, getting the right information. Things that weren't as important and feeling they were getting a better customer experience were things like helpful staff, going the extra mile, feeling pleasantly surprised, and feeling like a valued customer. And really what this was saying to us was, first, in terms of the top rated factors, this is really about accessibility. It's about being able to easily access services and the benefits of those services. And from a customer standpoint, what we quite often call as an effortless experience. So if I get the service and it works well, great. If I have a problem, I have an easy way of solving it. So my Walmart example in terms of the difficulty of what happens when I get the wrong package of groceries. How quickly does that get resolved? How easy is it to resolve that? The things that are bottom rated factors, interesting enough, they're not bad things, but they're considered table stakes. If you don't have that, you shouldn't be in the game in the first place. So we really are starting to see an evolution of expectations. And obviously, as you think about it, as companies continue to excel in terms of customer experience, customers start to see that as the standard. So if you're not meeting that standard, then you're falling behind in your ability to deliver customer experience. And finally, I'd make a comment on the concept of return on investment. Customer experience should only be done on the basis of building your business, whether it's on the top line or the bottom line. That's what it should be about. Yet there tends to be, by many organizations, a disconnect between customer experience and revenue or profitability growth, and it shouldn't be. Because ultimately, if you do not tie those together, then the justification for investments in customer experience over time will go away, and it will become the flavor of the month. Yet in the survey, we found that only 7% of organizations were directly able to calculate ROI against customer experience initiatives. And of those 7%, 73% said it was a major challenge, and 24% would say they were getting there, but only 2% of that 7% say they were figuring it out, which is pretty small. I think one of the challenges is that companies tend to look at analyzing ROI for customer experience the same way they would look at any other investment. Yet the challenge with customer experience is you don't always able to connect the dots immediately. It's something that you have to build momentum towards over a period of years, and you continue to develop that. Now, companies that have done that successfully are truly recognized for their ability to do great customer experience. Companies that are existing doing that is a lot more challenging because it's a little bit like breaking something to then improve it, a renovation versus a brand new build, if I could use that phrase. My suggestion to you is don't try and do it based on a traditional ROI methodology. What I suggest is identify opportunities to grow revenues and then look at those growth opportunities from a customer experience standpoint to say, what do we need to do to improve the customer experience to realize those revenues? One of the best areas to do that in, or easiest areas to do that in, is the call center. If you have a functioning call center in your organization, you quite often can identify changes in processes and practices and marketing approaches that you can identify, tie back to customer experience, and identify an actual revenue growth. So my recommendation always to make sure you do it slowly but carefully. Don't try and eat the elephant all at once. Finally, in summary, what are some of the key takeaways? Well, a couple of things. One is a customer experience focus does pay off. It does take time, though. Secondly, do not think of customer experience as a series of projects. It is not. It is an ongoing journey towards better understanding your customer and uncovering more opportunities to satisfy their needs, driving growth on a revenue basis and a profitability basis. Successful companies in CX are integrated into the brand promise and employee experience. Those companies that are really good at customer experience, you recognize them in part because of the brand. It's ingrained into their brand, and it's part of everything they do. Getting the basic right is critical. If you don't get those basics right, what you find is you never get to elevate customer experience. If you can't do the fundamentals well, you'll never get to second base, as they say. In some cases, digital service is the answer, but not in all cases. In some cases, it's about improved human interaction. It depends on the nature of your business and whether it's primarily a digital business or if it's a human face-to-face business. But most importantly, if you're going to go down this journey, you need to be able to measure it and assess where you are from a customer experience standpoint today. Understand that and then start from there. So I hope this was helpful to you today. My name is John Bardawill. My email address, if you have any further questions, is listed here. I'm on LinkedIn, so easy to find me, as well as if you're interested in the report that I just gave some highlights to, if you go to our website, tmginternationalinc.com, under the news tab and scroll down a few spots, you will find the State of Customer Experience in Canada report. So with that in mind, have a good conference, and thank you for your time today, and enjoy the rest of the conference.